Part 1. The great chamber of the Galactic Concordance Council hung in silence, a silence so thick it pressed against the eardrums of every delegate present. High above the planet Viridia, inside the spinning ring of Viridia Prime Station, 200 species sat in their assigned arcs, each row curved like the rings of an ancient tree. Lights shimmered softly from the ceiling, casting gentle reflections on polished floors made from asteroid glass. Outside the panoramic viewports, stars burned cold and distant. At the human arc, Daniel Hayes stood slowly. His dark suit was simple, unadorned, no medals, no ceremonial pins. Just a man in a room full of beings with scales, feathers, chitin, and skin that shimmered like oil on water. He had spoken for the last hour, his voice calm but firm, laying out the same facts the council had ignored for months. The void swarm was not a myth. It was real. It had already consumed 3 outer systems, and it was moving faster than anyone predicted. "Your motion is noted, Envoy Hayes," said High Speaker Zira, her voice like wind through dry reeds. She was Velnari, tall and slender, with eyes that held centuries of patience. "But the Concordance does not wage war on shadows. We require proof, not projections, not fear." Daniel didn't flinch. "The proof is in the silence," he said. 3 colonies stopped transmitting. No distress calls, no debris fields, just nothing. That's how the swarm works. It doesn't destroy. It erases. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some species shifted uneasily. Others remained still, unmoved. The Krellians, with their armored hides and deep voices, scoffed quietly. The Lumini, beings of pure light wrapped in containment suits, pulsed faintly in disapproval. Daniel looked around. He had hoped even now that someone would stand with him, but no one did. Humanity had always been the odd one out, too emotional, too impulsive, too willing to break rules for results. The council valued order above all. Humanity valued survival. He nodded once, then turned. Without another word, he walked out of the chamber. Behind him, his small team, 4 other humans in plain gray uniforms, rose and followed. Their footsteps echoed in the vast space, louder than they should have been. Every eye in the room watched them go. Outside, in the quiet corridor, Daniel stopped and leaned against the cool metal wall. He closed his eyes. He knew what came next. He had known for weeks, maybe months. Back on Earth, President Marcus Boone waited in the Situation Room beneath the White House. Screens showed feeds from every major news outlet in human space. They also showed the live feed from Viridia Prime, the moment Daniel walked out. Marcus didn't speak. He just watched, jaw tight, hands clasped. When the signal came through, a short-coded burst from Daniel's comms unit, Marcus gave a single nod. "Do it." Minutes later, across every human world, from Mars to Titan, from Luna to the orbital habitats of the Belt, a message appeared on every public screen, every private device, every ship's console. It was short, just 1 sentence. Effective immediately, the Terran Federation withdraws from the Galactic Concordance Council. No explanation. No apology. Just a clean break. At first, the galaxy didn't believe it. The Krellian ambassador laughed and called it human theater. The Lumini sent a polite inquiry, assuming it was a misunderstanding. Even the Velnari High Speaker thought it was a negotiating tactic, a way to force the Council's hand. But then the human ships began to vanish. Joint patrol routes along the Helios corridor went empty. Human engineers stopped maintaining the jump gate relays. Trade convoys that once carried Earth-grown food, Martian alloys, and Belter-crafted microchips simply stopped arriving. Diplomatic envoys were recalled. Embassies powered down. Comms channels went dark. Within a week, the silence was complete, and that was when the universe began to shudder. Without human jump stabilizers, devices that smoothed out the chaotic ripples in folded space, interstellar travel became dangerous. 2 freighters from the Grix, Alliance, misjumped and vanished near the Ophian Belt. A medical convoy carrying anti-plague serums to the Krellian homeworld arrived 3 weeks late because their route calculations kept failing. The serums spoiled. Thousands died. The Council scrambled. They tried to copy human tech, but it wasn't just about schematics. Human machines were built with a kind of rough intuition. Backups within backups. Jury-rigged solutions. Systems that adapted on the fly. Other species followed strict protocols. They couldn't understand how a human engineer might reroute power through a coffee maker to keep life support running, To them, it made no sense. To humans, it was Tuesday. On Viridia Prime, High Speaker Zira called an emergency session. "We must reach out to Earth," she said. This cannot stand, but pride ran deep in the council. Many argued that humanity was bluffing, that they would return, tail between their legs, begging for readmission once they realized how small they were without the concordance. What they didn't understand was this: humanity had never felt small. Back on Earth, Daniel Hayes stood on a hill outside Denver, watching the sunset paint the Rockies in gold and red. He hadn't slept in 2 days. His wife Carla brought him a cup of coffee. She didn't ask questions. She just stood beside him. "They'll come crawling back," she said softly. "Maybe," Daniel replied, "but not before it's too late." Far out on the frontier, aboard the scout ship Aurora's Reach, Captain Lena Ortiz reviewed sensor logs from the edge of the dead zone, the region where the last human colony had gone silent. Her crew was small, 6 people, all volunteers, all ex-military or ex-science corps. They weren't part of the concordance anymore. They weren't even officially part of Earth's fleet. They were just watching. Lena zoomed in on a strange energy signature near the ruins of Outpost Theta 9. It wasn't debris. It wasn't a ship. It was a pattern, faint, repeating, almost like a heartbeat. She frowned. "Kyle," she called to her engineer, "run a spectral analysis on this. Full bandwidth." Kyle Dawson, a lanky man with grease-stained fingers and a dry sense of humor, tapped at his console. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "I'm thinking the swarm isn't just eating," Lena said. "It's listening." She didn't report it to Earth Command. Not yet. She needed more proof. Real proof. The kind the Council couldn't ignore, even if they wanted to. As the Aurora's Reach turned toward the signal, deeper into the void, the stars behind it seemed to dim, as if holding their breath, and somewhere, far beyond the edge of known space, something ancient stirred. Part 2. Months passed and the silence from Earth grew heavier. The Galactic Concordance Council tried to act as if nothing had changed, but the truth was everywhere. Trade routes slowed to a crawl. Emergency response times doubled. Systems that once hummed with activity now flickered like dying embers. Without human engineers to maintain the jump gate network, travel between stars became risky. Ships vanished. Supplies ran low. Panic began to spread in the outer colonies. On Viridia Prime, High Speaker Zira watched reports pile up on her desk. A Krellian food convoy had been stranded for weeks near the Helios Belt because their navigation system kept glitching. They had no human techs to fix it. A Lumini research station lost 3 scientists to a mutated strain of the Vexus flu. Human medics had once kept it under control with a simple vaccine, but the formula was now locked behind Earth's firewalls. The Council had begged for the data. Earth had not replied. Shira sighed and rubbed her temples. She had underestimated humanity. They were not just another species with clever tools. They were the glue holding the fragile piece together, and now that glue was gone. Meanwhile, on the edge of known space, Captain Lena Ortiz guided the Aurora's Reach through a field of frozen asteroids. Her ship was small, barely more than a long-range scout, but it was fast and quiet, perfect for watching the dark. Her crew worked in silence, eyes fixed on screens, ears tuned to static. They had been tracking the void swarm for weeks now. Not by sight, no one had ever seen the swarm clearly, but by what it left behind. Empty systems, dead comms, strange energy echoes that faded too quickly to analyze. Lena had pieced together a pattern. The swarm didn't strike at random. It moved in a spiral, always heading inward toward the heart of the galaxy. And it avoided heavily armed worlds. It preferred the quiet ones, the research outposts, the mining colonies, the places with little defense but rich in data or energy. "It's not just eating matter," she told her crew one evening over ration packs. "It's harvesting information, learning." Kyle Dawson, her engineer, nodded slowly. "Like a virus copying code." "Exactly," Lena said. "And if it keeps learning, it'll figure out how to bypass even our best shields." Back on Earth, President Marcus Boone stood in the war room beneath the Capitol spire. Maps of human space glowed on the walls, dotted with red markers, systems on high alert. Green markers, safe zones, and a growing number of gray ones, silent. His advisors argued constantly. Some wanted to reach out to the Council. to offer limited aid in exchange for cooperation. Others said no, that the Council had made its choice, that humanity should focus only on its own. Boone listened, but he already knew the truth. The swarm wouldn't stop at human borders. It didn't care about politics. It would consume everything, Council, humans, everything, unless someone stopped it. And the Council would never act in time. They needed proof. They needed a threat they could see, touch, measure. Fear wasn't enough for them. Boone turned to his chief of intelligence. "Any word from Lena?" "Last signal came in 3 days ago," the officer replied. "She's near the Xylos Drift, no contact since." Boone nodded. Xylos, an old ruin. A dead world, once thought to be the cradle of the first spacefaring race. Most dismissed it as myth, but Lena believed there was something there, something the swarm wanted. He hoped she was right. On the Aurora's reach, Lena studied a new reading. A faint pulse repeating every 17.3 seconds. It came from deep inside the Xylos system. Not natural, not random, artificial. "Set course for Xylos," she ordered. "Aye, Captain," said pilot Nina Ruiz, her fingers dancing over the controls. The ship dropped out of fold space near the outer rim of the system. Xylos hung in the distance, a gray cracked sphere, its surface scarred by time. No atmosphere, no lights, just ruins, but as they drew closer, sensors picked up something strange. Energy, low but steady, coming from beneath the surface. "It's a machine," Kyle whispered, eyes wide. "Buried under kilometers of rock." Lena frowned. Why would the swarm care about a dead machine? "Maybe it's not dead," Nina said. They circled the planet for hours, scanning, mapping. Then, without warning, alarms blared. A massive energy surge erupted from the far side of Xylos. Not an explosion. A signal. Directed, purposeful. "It's calling something," Lena said. Minutes later, long-range sensors lit up. Dozens of contacts. No, hundreds. Moving fast. From the outer dark, the swarm was coming. Lena's heart pounded. They were outnumbered, outgunned. But they had something the swarm didn't expect, humans on the ground. "Prepare the drop pod," she ordered. "Kyle, Nina, you're with me. The rest of you stay with the ship. If we don't make it back, send everything we find to Earth, every bite." "Aye, Captain," came the reply, tight but steady. As the pod detached and plunged toward Xylos, the stars above seemed to dim. The swarm was close now, closer than ever before. On Earth, President Boone received a priority burst from the Aurora's reach. Just 3 words, "Swarm inbound Xylos." He didn't hesitate. He activated Protocol Ember, the emergency plan no one had ever thought they'd use. All human fleets were to stand by. All research labs to begin work on anti-entropic shielding. All citizens to prepare for possible evacuation. The Council still didn't understand. But Earth did. Humanity had left the Council not because they were angry, but because they knew what was coming. And they knew the Council would waste time debating while the galaxy burned. Now, alone on a dead world, Lena Ortiz stood at the edge of a buried machine older than civilization itself. The ground trembled beneath her boots. The sky darkened with approaching shadows. She keyed her comms. "Earth Command, if you can hear this. The swarm isn't just a threat. It's a mind, and it's heading for the core." Then she turned and walked into the ruins, Kyle and Nina at her side. Behind them, the first tendrils of the Void Swarm entered the system. The universe held its breath. Part 3. The Council finally broke. Not with a bang, but with a whisper of fear that spread through every delegation on Viridia Prime. Systems were falling faster now. Not just fringe colonies, mid-rim worlds with strong defenses, deep resources, and centuries of history. Gone. Not destroyed. Erased. No wreckage. No signals. Just silence where life had once hummed. High Speaker Zira called an emergency session, her voice trembling for the first time in her long life. She played the last transmission from the Krellian homeworld's outer defense ring, 3 seconds of static, then a single distorted word. Swarm. After that, nothing. The entire ring, with 12 warships and over 10,000 souls, vanished. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted, some in panic, others in denial. The Luminite pulsed erratically. The Grix slammed their armored fists on the floor. Even the calm Velnari elders shifted in their seats. "We must contact Earth," Zira insisted. "They warned us. They tried to help. And we turned them away." A Krellian ambassador scoffed. "They abandoned us first. Let them rot in their isolation." But others were quieter. The younger delegates, the ones who had worked alongside human engineers or trained with human medics, looked down. They remembered how things used to work, smoothly, quickly, with a kind of messy brilliance that no protocol could replicate. Jira ignored the protests. She sent a message. Not a demand, not a request for aid, just a simple, humble plea. We were wrong. Please speak with us. Earth did not reply. On the frontier, the Aurora's reach drifted in the shadow of Xylos, its hull scarred from near misses. Lena Ortiz and her team had barely escaped the surface before the swarm arrived in force. They'd seen it this time, not just energy readings, but shapes. Tendrils of dark matter, shifting like liquid shadow, wrapping around ruins, pulling them apart not with force but with something deeper, like unmaking. Back aboard, Lena reviewed the data Kyle had pulled from the buried machine. It wasn't just a terraformer as they'd first thought. It was a seed, a cosmic reset device built by a race so ancient their name had been lost to time. It could cleanse a system of corruption, not by destroying but by restoring balance. But it needed a key, a living mind to guide it, and the log suggested only a human mind could interface with it. Why us? Nina asked, staring at the schematics. Because we're messy, Kyle said with a tired smile. Because we feel too much, think too fast, break rules when we need to. The machine wasn't built for perfect logic. It was built for survival. Lena didn't argue. She knew he was right. She sent a tight beam message to Earth Command, encrypted and urgent. She explained everything, the machine, the swarm's goal, the key. She asked for orders. President Boone read the message in his private office. Rain tapped against the window. He thought of the billions on Earth, on Mars, on the moons of Jupiter. He thought of the council, still bickering while the dark closed in. He typed a short reply. You have full authority. Do what must be done. Lena read it and nodded. No grand speech. No fanfare. Just trust. Meanwhile, the council's desperation grew. They tried to copy human jump stabilizers using salvaged parts from abandoned outposts. It ended in disaster. A test jump near the Helios belt tore a hole in local spacetime. 3 Allied cruisers were lost, their crews scattered across unknown dimensions. The accident made headlines across the galaxy. For the first time, many began to wonder if humanity hadn't left out of pride, but out of pity. Jira, ashamed, sent another message to Earth. This time, she included the full logs of the Helios disaster. She admitted their failure. She begged not for tech, but for wisdom. Still, Earth remained silent, but not everyone on Earth agreed with the silence. In the streets of New Chicago, in the domes of Luna City, in the shipyards of Titan, people whispered. They remembered the friends they'd made in the council. The Krellian trader who always brought sweet root cakes. The Lumini artist who painted with light. The Grix medic who saved a child during the belt fever outbreak. The galaxy wasn't just a political body. It was people. President Boone heard those whispers. He knew the silence couldn't last forever. But timing mattered. If they returned too soon, the council would fall back into old habits, debating, delaying, doubting. They needed to feel the weight of their mistake. They needed to understand that survival wasn't about rules. It was about action. On Xylos, Lena made her decision. She would go back down. Alone this time. Kyle and Nina argued, but she shut them down gently. If I don't come back, get the data to Earth. And if Earth won't share it, send it to Zira. The whole galaxy deserves a chance. She suited up, checked her oxygen, and stepped into the drop pod. As she descended, the swarm sensed her. Tendrils rose from the surface like black vines reaching, but the ruins pulsed with a soft golden light. The machine was still active, still fighting back. Lena landed near the main entrance, a crack in the planet's crust that led deep underground. She moved fast, boots crunching on ancient stone. The air inside was stale but breathable. Strange glyphs glowed on the walls, reacting to her presence. At the heart of the complex, she found the core chamber. A sphere of crystal floated in the center, humming with power. Wires of light connected it to the walls, the floor, the ceiling. It was beautiful and terrifying. She approached slowly. As she touched the sphere, images flooded her mind. Stars being born, civilizations rising and falling, the swarm appearing not as a monster, but as a failed experiment. A guardian that turned on its creators, a cure that became the disease. The machine wasn't just a weapon. It was a memory, and it needed someone to remember how to heal. Outside, the swarm gathered. Not attacking, waiting. Lena took a deep breath. She placed both hands on the sphere. "I'm ready," she whispered. And deep beneath Xylos, the ancient machine began to wake. Part 4. The moment Lena touched the sphere, the chamber filled with light. Not harsh or blinding, but warm, like sunrise after a long night. The walls hummed and the glyphs flared brighter, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. She felt the machine's thoughts, not in words, but in feelings. Grief for what was lost, hope for what could be saved, and a deep ancient weariness. Outside, the swarm gathered. It did not attack. It watched. It knew what was happening. Back on the Aurora's reach, Kyle and Nina stared at their screens in disbelief. Energy readings from Xylos spiked off the charts, but there was no explosion, no shockwave. Instead, a strange calm settled over the planet. The dark tendrils that had covered its surface began to pull back, coiling like snakes sensing danger. "What's she doing down there?" Nina whispered. "I don't know," Kyle said, fingers flying over his console. "But whatever it is, the swarm doesn't like it." Deep in the core chamber, Lena understood now. The machine wasn't meant to destroy the swarm. It was meant to reset it, to strip away the corruption, the hunger, the endless drive to consume. But to do that, it needed a guide. A living mind to show it what balance looked like, and only a human mind, with its chaos and compassion, its flaws and fire, could do that. She closed her eyes and let the machine in. Memories flashed. Her childhood on Mars, her first flight, the faces of her crew, the quiet courage of President Boone, the stubborn hope of Earth. She poured it all into the sphere, not as data, as meaning. The swarm reacted. Tendrils lashed out, striking the ruins, trying to break through to the chamber. Stone cracked. Dust rained from the ceiling. But the golden light held firm, pushing back the darkness like dawn pushing back night. On the ship, alarms blared. "They're breaking through the eastern ridge," Nina shouted. "We've got maybe 5 minutes before they reach the core." Kyle didn't answer. He was already rerouting power from non-essential systems, boosting the ship's comms. "If she triggers the pulse, we need to get the data out fast. Before the interference hits," he typed furiously, linking their systems to Earth's emergency beacon network. Every second counted. Below, Lena felt the machine respond. It accepted her. It trusted her. And it was ready. But there was a cost. The interface wasn't just mental, it was biological. The machine needed human DNA, tuned to its frequency to anchor the reset. That meant someone had to stay inside when it fired. Someone had to become part of the signal. Lena knew what she had to do. She sent one last message to the ship. "Get clear." "On my mark," Nina's voice cracked over the comms. "Lena, no. There's got to be another way." "There isn't," Lena said softly. "Tell Earth. Tell them we did it right." She took a deep breath, then stepped fully into the sphere. Light swallowed her. Above, the Aurora's reach fired its thrusters and shot skyward just as the ground below began to glow. Then it happened. A pulse of golden energy erupted from Xylos. Not violent, but vast. It spread outward in a perfect sphere, silent and smooth, washing over the swarm like a wave over sand. Where it touched, the dark tendrils unraveled, not into nothing, but into harmless particles of light. The swarm didn't scream, it sighed. And then it was gone. The pulse kept going, racing through the system, past the Aurora's reach, past nearby stars, heading deeper into the galaxy. It carried with it a single message, not in any language, but in feeling. Remember balance. On the ship, Kyle and Nina clung to their seats as the wave passed through them. For a moment, they felt peace. Then silence, sensors went dark, comms died. Even the ship's lights flickered out. When power returned minutes later, Xylos was quiet. No swarm, no energy spikes. Just a dead world resting. "Lena?" Nina called, voice trembling. "Lena, respond." No answer. They waited, scanned, searched, nothing. Back on Earth, President Boone stood in the war room as the pulse hit. Every screen flared gold, then cleared. Reports began flooding in. Swarm activity had ceased across the galaxy. Entire systems were quiet, but not empty. Life remained. The threat was over. Boone exhaled. He knew what it had cost. He turned to his aide. "Send a message to every human world. Captain Lena Ortiz gave her life to save us all. Let no one forget her name. On Viridia Prime, High Speaker Zira felt the pulse too. She didn't understand what it was, but she felt its truth in her bones. She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. For the first time, she understood humanity, not as reckless, but as brave. Not as chaotic, but as necessary. She stood and addressed the council, her voice strong. We owe them everything. And we will spend the rest of our days earning the right to stand beside them again. The Aurora's Reach circled Xylos one last time. Kyle and Nina recorded everything. The calm surface, the silent ruins, the absence of the swarm. Then, with heavy hearts, they set course for home. As they left orbit, a faint signal blinked on Kyle's console. Weak, buried in static. But there, he played it. A voice barely there whispered, "I'm okay." They stared at each other, stunned. "Lena?" Nina whispered. The signal cut out. But it had been real. Somewhere, deep in the ruins or beyond, Lena Ortiz had survived. Not as she was, but as something new. Part human. Part memory. Part light. The Aurora's Reach flew on, carrying hope back to a broken galaxy. And far below on the quiet surface of Xylos, a single golden flower pushed through the cracked stone, a bloom where nothing had grown in 10,000 years. Part 5. News of the swarm's end spread faster than any ship could fly. Not through comms or broadcasts, but through feeling. Across the galaxy, beings woke from uneasy sleep with a sense of calm they hadn't known in years. Colonies that had lived in fear for months opened their airlocks and stepped outside without checking scanners. Children played under open skies again. The universe, for the first time in a long time, felt safe. But peace came with questions. Who had done this? How? The answer came from the Aurora's Reach. Kyle and Nina returned to human space with their data logs, their recordings, and their story. They spoke of Lena Ortiz, of the machine beneath Xylos, of the golden pulse that washed away the dark. Earth Command verified their report. Then, for the first time since the withdrawal, Earth opened a channel not to one world, but to all. President Marcus Boone addressed the galaxy from the steps of the Capitol spire. He spoke simply, without pride, without blame. He told them what humanity had known all along. The swarm was never just a monster. It was a warning, a sign that the galaxy had forgotten how to care for itself, and that sometimes saving everyone meant standing alone. The council listened. This time, they truly listened. High Speaker Zira led a delegation to Earth, not in warships but in unarmed shuttles. They came not to demand but to thank. They stood in silence at the memorial wall in New Chicago, where Lena Ortiz's name was carved in stone beside others who had given everything. Zira placed a Velnari bloom, a flower that only opened in the presence of deep truth, at the base of the wall. Then she asked to speak with President Boone. They met in a quiet garden, under real sunlight with real grass beneath their feet. No guards, no recorders, just two leaders who had both been wrong and both been changed. "We want to rebuild," Zira said, "but not the old way. Not with rules that strangle action. We want a new compact, one built on trust, not treaties." Boone nodded. "Then start by listening to the small voices. The miners, the medics, the teachers, not just the admirals and ambassadors." "That is what you did," she said. "That is what humans do," he replied. Back on the frontier, the Aurora's Reach was retired not as scrap, but as a museum ship orbiting Luna. People came from all over human space to walk its halls, to see the console where Kyle had sent the final data burst, to stand in the pod bay where Lena had taken her last step toward Xylos. But the real surprise came weeks later. A rescue beacon, old, battered human-made, activated on a moon orbiting Proxima Centauri. It hadn't been there before. No ship had reported a crash. Yet there it was, blinking steadily in the dark. A recovery team was sent. They found a life pod, scorched and cracked, half buried in gray dust. Inside, wrapped in a thermal blanket, was a woman, thin, pale, but alive. It was Lena Ortiz. She didn't remember much, just light, then falling, then waking up on the moon with no idea how she got there. Medical scans showed strange energy traces in her cells, resonances that matched the Xylos machine. But she was human, breathing, speaking. When asked what happened, she just smiled faintly. "The machine didn't take me. It let me go." News of her return sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Some called it a miracle. Others said it was proof that humanity carried something no other species could replicate. Not just courage, but grace. Lena didn't give interviews. She didn't want medals or titles. She asked only for one thing, to visit Xylos again. Months later, aboard a small research vessel, she returned to the dead world. The ruins were quiet, the machine silent, but as she walked the surface, something caught her eye, a patch of golden flowers growing where none had grown before. She knelt and touched one. It glowed softly under her fingers. She stayed there for hours, saying nothing. When she finally left, she carried a single seed in her pocket. Back on Earth, the new compact took shape. It wasn't called a council. It wasn't ruled from one place. It was a network, loose, flexible, built on mutual aid. Human engineers helped rebuild jump relays. Krellian medics shared their knowledge of deep tissue healing. Lumini artists taught others to see beauty in chaos. Grix warriors patrolled the outer dark, not for glory but for peace. And at the center of it all stood humanity, not as leaders but as partners. No longer outcasts, no longer saviors, just neighbors. Lena Ortiz never flew again. She settled on a quiet island off the coast of old California, where the ocean met the sky in endless blue. Sometimes children from the nearby village would visit, asking about the swarm, about Xylos, about the light that saved them all. She never gave them grand tales. She told them simple things. Always help when you can. Always question when you must, and never be afraid to walk into the dark if it means bringing someone else back into the light. Years passed. The galaxy healed. New colonies bloomed. Old enemies became friends. And every year, on the day the golden pulse swept the stars, people everywhere, human and alien alike, would step outside, look up, and remember. They remembered the silence after humanity left. They remembered the shudder that followed, and they remembered the courage it took to return. Not for thanks, but for hope. Lena lived to see it all. And when she finally closed her eyes for the last time, the flowers in her garden bloomed gold that night, even though it was winter. The universe did not shudder this time. It breathed.